I am getting really sick and tired of some of you claiming that animation is cinema. A few years ago, I was having a conversation with someone at church, and we were talking about movies, of course. And at one point, he mentioned that he did not like family films. And I brazenly said, "No, of course you like family films." And he kind of stepped back and was like, "Well, I just said I didn't, but thank you for telling me that I do, even though I don't." And I said, "Look, buddy," I didn't say buddy, I used his name, but are you here gonna honestly sit here and tell me that you don't like The Wizard of Oz? You don't like Toy Story? You don't like Babe? You don't like The Lion King or Beauty and the Beast? Or you don't like Oliver? And at that point, he realized what I was saying. He's like, "Oh yeah, I also mentioned E.T., of course." And he was like, "Oh, okay, I get what you're going with this." What the guy meant to say was, he didn't like little kid films, like movies that were made specifically for children that did not have a lot of appeal to him. But if it was a family film that had broad appeal, then yes, he did like it. Hey everyone, this is Kevin T. Rodriguez, film critic of iCritic.net, and I shared this story for a reason. It's because this video is probably not exactly what you think it is going to be. You might even say it is a clickbait title, although I think I'm going to make a pretty strong case on why I think it should be titled that. There has been a debate going on since one of the Academy Awards recently, where a bunch of the live action actresses who played like Cinderella, Jasmine, and Ariel in the live action Disney remakes handed out the Oscar for Best Animated Feature Film. And they basically made a little bit and show how animated films were something that kids watched and adults tolerated. This inspired a lot of animators and directors to proudly proclaim animation is cinema. And it seems like there has been like a real urgency to hammer that point home, that animation is cinema. Cinema is animation. I think I just tapped the microphone, so sorry about that. I think with Guillermo del Toro's most recent win for Pinocchio, he has been a great ambassador, particularly because he is a respected director and he is actually going to be making more animated films. And I believe the animation community is very lucky to be alive at this point in time, where even the newest Spider-Man movie could be considered a Best Picture contender at this year's Academy Awards itself. Nevertheless, I am getting really tired of some people going on Twitter and Facebook and their YouTube videos proudly proclaiming that animation is cinema, when their scope of what cinema is seems to be extremely limited to children's films. Before I get into what I'm talking about and specifically and why it's a problem, let's say you are a Star Wars fan and you say that science fiction is your favorite genre. You love science fiction. And people start saying, "Oh, okay, what's your favorite science fiction movie?" And you say, "Star Wars." Now, for the record, there is nothing wrong with this response. And they say, "Okay, well, what other science fiction things do you like?" "Oh, pretty much Star Wars." "Really? You don't watch Dune?" "Nope, I watch Star Wars." "Have you seen 2001: A Space Odyssey?" "Nope, Star Wars." "iRobot?" "Star Wars." "Are you going to see is it Star Wars? If it's not Star Wars, I'm not interested." And at that point, you'd probably look at that person and say, with all due respect, I don't think you're a fan of science fiction per se. I think you are a fan of Star Wars. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But if Star Wars is all you watch, then your concept of science fiction as cinema is limited. And there's a reason you don't talk a big game about that, because if you go around saying, "I am a huge science fiction fan of cinema, of science fiction cinema," well, you can't honestly say that if you have not also seen the 2001s, the iRobots, the Dunes, I haven't seen The Creator, but I hear it's pretty good. But there's so much science fiction out there, maybe even Star Trek for Pete's sakes. So if all you watch is Star Wars, then claiming that science fiction is great cinema rings as a hollow compliment because you don't actually watch what science fiction has to offer. You watch Star Wars. Now then, let's get around to animation. I probably spend too much time on X, which is formerly Twitter. I like communicating with the animation community, with fellow film critics and stuff like that, and because of what I do and what I talk about, I get a lot of posts from people who are animation fans, and they like to claim animation is cinema. And they push that narrative. They shout that opinion up to the high heavens, and they say, animation cinema. And I normally would not have an issue with this. The problem is, and the reason I'm going to be vague is because I think this is like a general problem with some of the animation community people, not specific people who communicate with me, is that a vast majority of these animation is cinema preachers don't actually seem to have an understanding or even much of a concept of how good animation can be as cinema. They primarily watch Disney, which is cinema, and touch on that in a minute. And they watch movies that are really made for little kids. Like, there are some accounts out there that in their bios they have animation is cinema. What do they talk about all day? They talk about Curious George. They talk about the Tom and Jerry 2021 movie, and that's not even fully animated, by the way. They talk about the Paw Patrol movie and Paw Patrol the Mighty movie. Like, they act as if this is one of the best animated films in years. The new Ninja Turtles movie. Admittingly, that's a pretty good movie. Is it the best animated movie of all time? No. Is it close to one of the best animated movies of all time? No. Is it one of the best movies of the year? No, it's not. It's a very, very good movie. And yeah, in terms of the style and the sound and everything, yeah, that's definitely a step up from some of these other movies I mentioned, but it's still very limited. And there are people who are obsessing about this movie. And here's what's kind of starting to drive me nuts. I am getting tired of people saying, I'm an animation fan, animation is cinema. However, it is cinema in regards to this very limited view that I have of it. Circling back around to Disney. Disney films are unequivocally cinema. Disney has made some of the best movies of all time. Snow White, Pinocchio, Fantasia, Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, The Jungle Book. Mary Poppins is like a hybrid thing. So, you would think that there would be like no issues with Disney fans who claim that animation is cinema, except there's usually two problems with Disney fans. First of all, they tend to only want to watch Disney films, and movies from other studios like DreamWorks or Illumination or even Studio Ghibli can be seen as lesser films, sometimes without them even having watched the film. They just like Disney, and that's one problem. The second problem is there tends to be, I call generational Disney fans, where some Disney fans really love the old stuff. The old stuff is better than the new stuff. Why don't we just watch that? While some people, it's like, it's just the new stuff that they like. The old stuff is old, it's outdated, it's problematic. Why do we watch it at all? And as a result, you not only have groups of people who refuse to not only go outside of the Disney bubble, they are in bubbles in the bubble. It's very, very weird. And so I'm kind of like, you can watch these other movies and still like Disney. It is not a personal betrayal to Walt or Bob Iger, if you prefer. It just isn't. And yet it happens. Now, they'll still say that animation is cinema, but you remind them that Shrek beat Monsters, Inc. for the first Academy Award. Oh boy. Like, you swear to God, well, Shrek is a cheap fart fest of a movie. Like, it was nowhere near as good as Monsters, Inc. And it's really strange. Now, there is another guy on X that I follow, and I talk once in a while with him on his Are they called tweets still? Well, I'll just call them a tweet. And I have to give this person a lot of credit. He is on the autistic spectrum. In many ways, he would normally fall into some of these bubbles, except he decided he was going to do an experiment where he was going to sit down and he was going to watch all the Studio Ghibli films. He'd never watched them before. I don't know exactly why, but he never had. And so he was going to watch them all. And by the end of the marathon, it was like, where have these films been on my life? So many of these were great. And I give him a lot of credit. He opened the door to something else and he discovered something he loved. And that is wonderful. That is an example of how the animation is cinema thing is supposed to be done. You believe animation is cinema and you want to see more of it. You want to get out of your genre and or your specific studio love, and you want to go explore other things. You know, people who don't like some of the Disney movies like Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, and Frozen doesn't mean they don't like animation. It means that they probably don't like musicals, which is what all of those are. But if you show them something like Akira or Watership Down or The Illusionist, maybe they would have a very different reaction to those movies. And ultimately, this is where my problem is coming in. And maybe you figured it out by now, maybe you haven't. But if you haven't figured it out, I want people to push animation in cinema. I want them to push that narrative. I want them to proclaim that, but I want them to mean it. I don't want people to be getting on social media claiming animation cinema, and everyone who doesn't believe that are just idiots. And then you use Paw Patrol as your example. You use SpongeBob SquarePants or the Ninja Turtles as your example. And you know, like that science fiction example earlier, where if all you do is watch Star Wars, I would say your concept of science fiction as cinema to be a very, very limited one. There are great directors and animated films that the animation cinema crowd would never have seen. They will probably never seek them out, and they probably won't even watch them if you ask them to, because really they are connected to franchises or certain studio brands. Like, you don't have to see Watership Down to be an animation fan, but you know what? As an animation fan, I believe your life will be better if you watch that, as well as Martin Ross's other film, The Plague Dogs. What if you saw out Twice Upon a Time, which had the unique cutout animation? That's great. I mean, thankfully, Aardman is, you know, popular for Wallace and Gromit and Chicken Run, but maybe checking out The Pirates, An Adventure with Scientists, that would not be a bad, you know, thing to add to your viewing pleasure. There's just so much great animation out there. Animation is cinema, and it makes for wonderful cinema. But the thing is, if there is a movement online that makes this claim, and all they talk about are the Disney films, all they talk about is how Sing and Sing 2 are drastically underrated films. And they are underrated. I think those movies are pretty good. And if all they do is talk about Jonah, a VeggieTales movie, or the Paw Patrol movies, or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, as if this was like some of the greatest things cinema has to offer, you know what? I'm sorry to say, you're not going to convince people that that's cinema. Most of these movies, Disney films excluded, are made for little kids. Much like showing someone in the 90s all of these animated Disney films that were musicals, and there's some people who just don't like musicals, and they're not going to watch them regardless whether they're live action or animated. I have a friend who I work with, well, a coworker, I should say, really, and he has never seen The Lion King. I'm like, dude, you got to see The Lion King. Heck, it's in theaters right now. Let's go. And he's just not interested. Doesn't like musicals. You know what? Hey, if he doesn't like musicals, maybe he's not going to like The Lion King. I don't know. Here's the thing. If you really want to push the narrative that animation is cinema, not only do you yourself have to believe it and spread your wings and watch some of these other things that are animated that do make for great cinema, you also have to remember Curious George is not something that the average person will probably consider cinema. It's definitely got some great moments, and it's cute for a kid's film, But that's not your best argument for cinema. Paw Patrol, the Mighty movie, is not your best argument for cinema. Tom and Jerry, the movie, both of them are not good examples of great cinema. Obviously, many of the works of Studio Ghibli, that can be cinema. The Disney Renaissance films, those can be cinema. Some of the early Don Bluth, the Sylvain Chomet, the Isao Takahata films. There are great animated movies out there. Animation is cinema. I'm just getting really tired of online movements saying that. And then the best examples they can show are like a bunch of puppies who transform into the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Like, that's not going to convince anyone. But anyway, that's a rant. I now leave the question off to you. What do you think? Do you agree, disagree? Would love to know. Comment below. Like, favorite, share, subscribe. And as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.